She walked into the most dangerous marriage in the city, and she already knew every secret inside it. Everyone in the city believed Elara Voss was a blind girl being handed over like a debt payment to the most feared mafia boss alive. They thought she was a victim. They were wrong. Before you watch this story unfold, hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss what comes next, because this one will shake you. Drop your city or country in the comments right now. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. Stay until the very end. You won't see the twist coming. The morning they came to collect her, Elara was already dressed, not because she had been told what time they would arrive. Nobody had told her anything. Her father had gone quiet 3 days earlier, the way he always went quiet when he had done something he could not undo, shuffling through the apartment in his socks, not eating, picking up his phone and setting it down without dialing. Elara had heard it all. She heard everything. She sat at the small table near the kitchen window with her hands flat on the surface and her white cane leaning against the chair beside her. She was wearing the gray dress with the buttons down the front, the one her mother had bought her 4 years ago before the accident, before everything changed. It still fit. She had made sure of that. Outside, 2 floors down, a car had been idling for 11 minutes. Not a taxi. The engine was too smooth, too controlled, the kind of idle that belonged to a vehicle maintained by people who took maintenance seriously. 2 doors had opened and closed. 2 sets of footsteps had crossed the sidewalk. One man walked with his weight on his right side, favoring his left knee. The other walked like he was trying not to make any sound at all, which meant he was the one she needed to watch. Her father knocked twice before opening the door. He always knocked twice, even in his own apartment. She had noticed that years ago and never said anything. "Elara!" His voice was dry, scratched, the voice of a man who had been up since before dawn. "They're here." "I know." A pause. She heard him grip the door handle tighter. The metal shifted slightly under the pressure. "You should—" "There are things I wanted to explain." "You don't have to." "I do. What I did, the debt, the arrangement, I didn't have a choice." She reached for her cane and stood up from the chair. Slowly. Not because she needed time to orient herself, she knew every inch of this apartment, every creak in the floor, every corner that caught the draft from the window in December. But because she wanted him to have to stand there and look at her while she did it. "You had choices," she said. "You made the one that was easiest for you." Her father, Ronaldo Voss, did not respond to that. She heard him exhale, a long, controlled exhale, the kind people do when they are trying to hold something inside. And then he stepped back from the doorway so she could pass. The 2 men were waiting in the hallway outside the apartment. The one who favored his right side spoke first. He introduced himself as a representative of Mr. DeLuca, said the car was downstairs, said they would handle her luggage. He was polite in the way that people are polite when politeness is a professional requirement rather than a natural state. Elara said, "I have 1 bag." "We can take it. I'll carry it." A pause. The polite man recalibrated. "Of course." The other one, the quiet walker, said nothing at all during the ride down in the elevator or the walk through the lobby. He held the building door open for her without being asked. She clocked the distance between the door and the car, 8 steps, and got in without hesitation, which she knew surprised them. People always expected her to be slower. They expected her to reach for walls that weren't there, to angle her body uncertainly, to ask for help she didn't need. When she moved with the ease of someone who simply did not need to see, it unsettled them. She had learned a long time ago that unsettling people before they had a chance to underestimate her was the first and most useful thing she could do. The car smelled like leather and a cleaning product with a faint chemical edge. Climate-controlled, no radio. The quiet man drove. The polite man sat in the passenger seat and made 1 phone call that lasted 45 seconds, during which he said, "In transit," and nothing else. Elara kept her hands folded in her lap and listened to the city pass outside the windows. She had been listening to the city her entire life. Even before the accident at 22, even when she still had the use of her eyes, she had been the kind of person who listened more than she looked. After the accident, a car that came through a red light on a Wednesday morning in November, 3 seconds that rearranged the rest of her life. That instinct had become something else entirely. Not a compensation. not a coping mechanism. Something sharper than either of those words suggested. She tracked the route by feel and sound and time. 11 minutes of surface streets, 2 left turns and 1 right, then onto a highway for 6 minutes, then off again, through what she judged to be a residential area. The road surface was better maintained, the engine noise changed slightly as sound bounced differently off larger structures. The air that leaked through the door seals carried the smell of lawn and old stone. Another 7 minutes. 2 security checkpoints, both with rolling gates. The second gate was heavier, slower. When the car stopped, she heard gravel shift under the tires. The DeLuca mansion. She had never been here, but she had spent the past 2 weeks building a picture of it from everything available. Public records, local news archives her neighbor's daughter had read aloud to her, and one very long conversation she had managed to have with a woman named Teresa, who had worked as a household cleaner at the property for 3 years before leaving. Teresa had not known why Alara was asking. People rarely did. The house was large, older than it appeared from its reputation. The foundation settled unevenly on one side. She felt the slight grade of the driveway as she got out of the car. 11 exterior cameras based on Teresa's account, but Teresa had been gone 18 months, and security arrangements changed. She would need to update that number. The front door opened before she reached it. A woman's footsteps came down 2 steps to meet her. Mid-40s, maybe slightly older, low heels, efficient pace. "Miss Voss, I'm Carla. I manage the household." The voice was measured, not unkind, but it carried the particular flatness of someone who had learned not to form opinions about the things she witnessed. "Thank you for coming out to meet me. Mr. DeLuca will see you in the front study. He asked that you come directly. Not, welcome to the house. Not, can I show you to your room first? Directly." She noted that. The interior was cool and smelled like old wood, wax, and something cooking at a distance. Garlic, oil, something slow roasted. The floors were hardwood, not new. They had a particular resonance, the kind that only comes from age and heavy use, and they gave her a sense of the ceiling height within 3 steps. High, probably 14 feet. She heard at least 4 other people in the house from the foyer alone. Someone on an upper floor walking. Someone near the back of the house speaking quietly into a phone. 2 people in what she estimated was the kitchen. Carla led her down a hallway, turned right, stopped at a door that was already ajar. "Mr. DeLuca," Carla said, and then she stepped aside. Alara walked in. She knew he was there before he spoke. He was standing near the far wall, not behind a desk, not seated, standing. People who stood when someone entered a room were either performing dominance or they were genuinely restless. She would find out which. "Sit down," he said. His voice was lower than she had expected, not the voice of a man who needed to raise it to be heard. Controlled. There was something underneath it, something she would have called exhaustion in another person, but she wasn't sure it was that simple. "I'd rather stand," she said. A pause. Not a long one. 3 seconds. "Suit yourself." She heard him move, not toward her, but to the side, slightly. Repositioning. She had the sense of a large room, probably 20 feet across, with a window on the far wall based on the faint sound differential and the shift in air temperature near where he stood. "You know why you're here," Vittorio DeLuca said. "Yes." "Then I won't insult you by explaining it." "I'd appreciate that." Another pause. She heard him pick something up from a surface, the faint sound of paper, or possibly a folder. "Your father's debt to my organization is $540,000. The arrangement clears it. You live here. We're married by legal contract. You stay out of my business. I stay out of your life. Clear? Is that what you tell all your wives?" She heard it, the faint change in his breathing, not amusement, something more careful than that. "You're the first," he said. "Then I'd say you could use some practice at this." "Miss Voss." "Alara." A beat. "Alara, I'm going to say this once. I didn't want this arrangement. Your father created a situation that required a resolution. This is the resolution. I expect you to conduct yourself accordingly." She tilted her head slightly. She had learned that people read this gesture as uncertainty, as someone trying to compensate for not being able to see. In reality, it was how she positioned her ear to capture sound more precisely. You have a man named Carver stationed outside this door, she said. He came with you from the hallway, not from upstairs. He's been here less than 2 weeks because he doesn't know where the third step from the bottom of the main staircase creaks. I heard him catch himself on it when we came through the foyers. You also have a meeting you're trying to end this conversation for because the phone in your jacket vibrated twice in the last minute, and you haven't answered it yet. The room went quiet. Not the comfortable quiet of a conversation between two people who understood each other. The tight, pressurized quiet of a man recalibrating everything he had just assumed. How did you... He stopped himself. She appreciated that. People who stopped themselves mid-question were people who understood that finishing it might give away more than the answer would. I listen, she said simply. He did not respond immediately. She heard him set the folder or paper down on whatever surface he had picked it up from. She heard him turn, very slightly, toward her. You'll be in the East Wing, he said finally. Carla will show you the room. Dinner's at 7. You don't have to come. I will come. That's your choice. Yes, she said. It is. She turned toward the door before he said anything else. She found the handle without pausing, without reaching. She had measured the room when she walked in, and stepped back into the hallway, where Carla was waiting with her single bag at her feet. Behind her, she heard Vittorio De Luca pull out his phone and answer the call he had been holding for 4 minutes and 30 seconds. She listened to his voice change as he spoke. Not the words. She was already too far down the hallway for that. The tone, the way it dropped half a register, sharpened, lost whatever thin courtesy it had held during their conversation. That was who he was when he didn't think anyone was watching. She filed it away. The East Wing was quieter than the rest of the house. Her room was large, 12 steps from door to window, 9 from the near wall to the far, with heavy furniture that had been in place a long time and rugs that muffled sound in a way she would need to account for. There was a chair near the window, a writing desk, a bed with a frame that creaked on the left side when she tested the edge of the mattress. Carla told her she could ring if she needed anything and left without much ceremony, which Ilara respected. She stood at the window for a while. Outside, she could hear what she estimated were 2 guards doing a perimeter walk, their patterns inconsistent in the way that suggested the route was loosely standardized but not rigid. Good to know. She thought about her father standing in the doorway of the apartment that morning, gripping the handle, trying to explain himself. She thought about the 5 years between the accident and this morning, 5 years of people handing her things carefully and speaking slowly and pulling out chairs she didn't need pulled out. 5 years of being the tragedy, the poor Voss girl, the blind one, the one who would never quite manage on her own. She thought about Marco Bellandi. She had heard his name twice in the last 2 weeks, once from a retired city official whose home she had visited with a friend, once from a woman at a fundraising luncheon she had attended with her neighbor. Neither time had the name been said with warmth. Marco Bellandi, Vittorio's second-in-command. Marco Bellandi, who had been with the De Luca organization for 12 years and who, according to the retired official, had expected to inherit something that Vittorio was not ready to give him. She didn't know exactly what yet, but she had learned, over 5 years of listening to a world that forgot to lower its voice around her, that ambition and resentment, in the same man, in the same organization, were never idle. She would need to find him in this house, hear how he moved, hear how he spoke when he thought she was no threat. She was good at being no threat. At 7 o'clock, she walked to the dining room without assistance, pausing once at a junction in the hallway she hadn't mapped yet, triangulating her position from a sound she'd clocked earlier, a clock in what she now confirmed was a sitting room on the right, and arrived at the dining room door at the same time as a man coming from the opposite direction. He stopped. She stopped. "You must be the wife," said a voice. Male, mid-30s, she estimated. Smooth, the kind of smooth that was practiced. And underneath it, something else. Something she had learned to recognize in certain kinds of men, the particular timbre of contempt that had been carefully coded over. "And you must be Marco Bellandi," she said. A beat. "Vittorio told you about me?" "No," she said. "Nobody told me about you." She stepped past him into the dining room. She heard him stand very still in the doorway for a moment before he followed. Vittorio was already at the table. 3 other men were in the room. She counted footsteps and breathing and the particular way bodies displaced air in an enclosed space. She took the chair closest to the window, not the seat she'd been directed to. She'd heard Carla mention the arrangement to someone in the kitchen earlier, but the one that gave her the most acoustic coverage of the room. Nobody said anything about it. Dinner was quiet in the way that power dynamics made things quiet. Food arrived, wine was poured. Conversation moved around her without quite including her, which was exactly what she had expected, and she did not push against it. She ate slowly, listened to everything. She heard the way Marco addressed Vittorio, always deferential on the surface, but with a half-second delay before compliance that most people would never notice. She heard the way Vittorio answered him, briefly, without warmth, but also without active hostility, the way you spoke to someone you had worked beside so long that you had stopped fully seeing them. She heard the way Marco addressed her, once, asking if she needed anything, his voice carrying that practiced smoothness, that careful kindness. And she said no thank you, and she heard him exhale through his nose when she looked back down at her plate. He didn't think she was dangerous. She was the blind wife, the paid debt. She was furniture. Good. She was still in that role 4 days later when she heard, through the wall of the study she was sitting in, 2 men speaking in lowered voices on the other side. She had been sitting there for 40 minutes, long enough for whoever was in the adjoining room to forget she was close. She recognized both voices. Marco. And someone she had not yet identified, a voice with a different regional accent, slightly nasal, and a habit of clicking his tongue before keywords. She did not move. She barely breathed. She heard the words alliance. She heard the words timeline. She heard, clearly and without ambiguity, the word eliminate. And then she heard Marco say Vittorio's name, and she understood that what she had suspected in the first 20 minutes of arriving in this house, what she had filed away as something she would need to verify, was not suspicion anymore. She sat in the chair with her hands in her lap and her face perfectly still, and she began making decisions. She had been brought here as a payment, as collateral, as a woman with no power and no future and nothing to offer except her silence and her compliance. But they had brought the wrong woman. And the clock that Marco Bellondi was running, whatever its timeline, whatever its target, had just started running against a woman who had been listening to clocks her entire life. She would not warn Vittorio yet. She didn't have enough. And she had learned, in 26 years of being underestimated, that moving too early was the only mistake that couldn't be recovered from. She needed more. She would get it. She always did. What she did not know, what she could not have known, sitting in that chair in the East Wing study while Marco's voice filtered through the wall, was that she had already been noticed. Not by Marco. Not by Vittorio. By a third person entirely, one whose name she had not yet learned. One who had been in this house for 3 years, and who had watched the new wife arrive and move through the mansion with a particular kind of ease that did not match the story they had all been told. And that person had already made one phone call that by morning would put Alara Voss in a danger she hadn't yet accounted for. The phone call had been made at 11:14 at night. Alara knew this because she had heard the footsteps stop in the hallway outside her room at 11:12, pausing, not the casual pause of someone changing direction, but the deliberate stillness of someone listening first, and then continuing toward the east staircase. The person was light on their feet, female. She had encountered that particular gate twice since arriving, once near the kitchen in the early morning, once outside the laundry room on the second floor. A household employee. Not Carla. Someone younger, less certain of their position. She had lain in the dark and listened to the footsteps descend the stairs, counted the seconds, heard the faint sound of a door. Not a room door, an exterior door, the kind with a heavier seal and a different acoustic signature when it closed. And then nothing. 3 minutes and 40 seconds of nothing. Then the door again. Footsteps returning. Lighter this time, the way people moved when something had been released from them. Alara had stayed in bed with her hands flat on her sternum and her eyes open in the dark, which was the same as her eyes closed, and she had thought about what that meant. By morning, she had a working theory. She just needed one conversation to test it. Breakfast at the DeLuca mansion was not a communal event. She had established that in her first 2 days. Vittorio ate early, alone or with whoever had business that required his attention before 8 o'clock. The household staff ate in the kitchen in rotation. Marco Belandi, she had determined, did not appear before 9, and when he did, he went directly to the West Wing where Vittorio kept his working offices. She ate in the small dining room off the kitchen at 7:30. Carla brought coffee and a plate without being asked. She had learned Alara's preferences inside 48 hours, which meant she was either naturally observant or had been instructed to be. Alara suspected the latter. "Carla," she said when the woman set the cup down. "Yes?" "There's a girl who works mornings on this floor. Not you. Someone younger. Dark shoes, soft sole. She walks with her right foot turned slightly outward." A pause. Very brief. "That would be Petra." "How long has she worked here?" 3 years, I believe." Carla's voice had not changed, but something in her posture had. Alara heard the subtle shift, the slight repositioning of weight, the hyper-awareness that came when someone understood they were being asked something more than what the words suggested. "Is there a problem?" "No," Alara said. "No problem. I'd like to speak with her sometime today, whenever she has a moment." Another pause. "I'll let her know." "Thank you." Carla left. Alara drank her coffee and ate and listened to the house wake up around her. The guards cycling through the morning perimeter check outside, the kitchen radio that someone turned on low and then lower when they remembered she was nearby, as though sound might offend her. She let them think whatever they needed to think. She was on her second cup when she heard Vittorio's footsteps in the hallway. She recognized his walk now. She had logged it on the first day, the particular weight distribution, the length of stride, the faint sound his left heel made when he was moving at his natural pace versus when he was slowing deliberately for something. Right now, he was moving at his natural pace, which meant he had not noticed her through the doorway yet. Then he paused. She did not look up from her cup. "You're up early," he said. "I'm always up early." He came into the room. She heard him go to the sideboard, coffee, the particular sound of that specific carafe, and then he did something she had not anticipated. He sat down, not at the far end of the table, closer, across from her. She waited. "Carla said you've been walking the house at night," he said. "Carla reports to you." "Everyone in this house reports to me." "That must be exhausting," she said. A beat. "Is there a reason you're walking the house at night?" "I was learning it." She set her cup down. "I need to know where I am. I do that by walking the space until I have it. It takes a few days. I apologize if it alarmed anyone." It didn't alarm anyone. His voice was careful. "I'm asking because I want to understand your habits." "Why?" He didn't answer right away. She heard him turn the cup in his hand, ceramic against ceramic, a small rotation, something he probably did without knowing he did it. "Because you're in my house," he said finally, "and I don't like variables I haven't accounted for." "Am I a variable?" "You're currently the largest one I have." She almost smiled. She didn't, because she wasn't ready to give him that yet, but she noted it, the honesty of it. She had not expected him to be honest. "Then we have something in common," she said. "I also don't like variables I haven't accounted for." Silence. The comfortable kind, which also surprised her. She had been prepared for a man who filled silence with control. Statements, directives, the kind of noise powerful men made when quiet made them feel exposed. Vittorio DeLuca sat with the silence and let it settle. "Marco thinks you're a problem," he said. There it was. She kept her hand still on the table. "Does he?" "He came to me last night, said your presence in the house was destabilizing, that the men were distracted." A pause. His word was distracted. Distracted how? He didn't elaborate. She thought about the footsteps in the hallway at 11:14. She thought about Petra, 3 years in this house, light shoes, right foot turned slightly outward. "What do you think?" she asked. "I think Marco has opinions about most things." "That's not an answer." "No," Vittorio said. "It's not." She heard him stand. The chair moved back precisely, controlled, the way he did everything. He picked up his cup and she heard him pause near the doorway. The study on the second floor is unlocked during the day, he said. There are books, audiobooks as well, if that's... He stopped. Thank you, she said, before he had to find the end of that sentence. He left. She listened to his footsteps move down the hall, then up the main staircase, and she sat with what had just happened and turned it carefully in her mind the way he had turned that cup. He had come to warn her about Marco. Not explicitly, but the information he had chosen to give her and the way he had chosen to give it amounted to a warning. He might not have recognized it as that himself. She found Petra at 10:15 in the upstairs linen closet, refolding towels that didn't need refolding. Alara stopped in the doorway. She did not announce herself immediately. She listened to the rhythm of Petra's movement, quick, nervous, too much pressure in the hands, the kind of motion that had nothing to do with towels and everything to do with whatever was happening in the person's head. Petra, she said. The movement stopped instantly. Mrs. DeLuca. The voice was young, 22, maybe 23, and frightened. Not the low-grade unease that everyone in this house seemed to carry. This was something sharper, sitting right at the surface. You don't have to call me that. A beat. Miss Voss, then. That's fine. Alara stepped into the closet doorway, not all the way in. She left space, kept the exit clear between them. I want to ask you something, and I want you to know that whatever you say stays with me. I have no interest in making your life harder than it already is. Silence. Someone asked you to watch me, Alara said, to report what I do, where I go in the house, who I speak with. She heard Petra's breath change, a sharp intake, controlled immediately, the way you controlled a breath when you were trying to make sure no one noticed you'd reacted. I'm not angry, Alara said. I'm not going to tell anyone. I just need to know who asked you. The silence stretched. She heard Petra's hands tighten on the towel she was holding, fabric compressing, the faint pull of threads under pressure. If I tell you, Petra said very quietly, and he finds out, he won't find out from me. Another silence. Longer this time. Alara waited. Mr. Belandi, Petra said. The name came out like something she was spitting free. He told me, he said it was for Mr. DeLuca's protection, that you might be... He said your father had arranged the marriage to put someone inside the house. A spy. A pause. I didn't want to. I just work here. I understand, Alara said. You're not in trouble. What did you tell him last night? A very long pause. I told him you'd been walking the house at night, Petra said, that you'd asked Carla about the guard rotations. Another breath, ragged at the edges. I'm sorry. I didn't know what to do. Alara nodded once. What did he say when you told him? He said good. That it confirmed what he already knew. Petra's voice had gone very small. Miss Voss, is he going to... Nothing is going to happen to you, Alara said. And she meant it, and she also knew that the ability to keep that promise depended entirely on what happened in the next several days. Go back to work. Behave exactly as you have been. If he asks you to report again, you report. Tell him what I do, where I go. It doesn't matter. But tell him, Alara said. What he hears won't change what I'm doing. It'll only tell me what he's looking for. She left Petra in the closet and walked back down the hall with her cane and her working theory and the particular cold clarity that settled into her when something she had suspected became something she knew. Marco had already decided she was a threat. He was gathering evidence that could be used against her, evidence of spying, evidence of deception, and he was building a narrative before she could build one of her own. If he moved first, if he got to Vittorio before she had enough to counter with, she would be removed from this house with nothing, and her father's debt would become something else, something with no resolution but a bad one. She needed to accelerate. That afternoon, Alara did something she had been building toward since the second day. She let herself get lost. Not truly lost. She was incapable of truly losing herself in a space she had already mapped. But she took a route through the west wing that brought her past the corridor outside Vittorio's main office, moved slowly, used her cane more visibly than she needed to, and made a point of pausing at the junction nearest the office door, with her head tilted in the way people read as confusion. She heard two voices inside, Vittorio and a man she had catalogued as Sandro, older, 50 at least, careful, the kind of man who had survived a long time in a dangerous organization by being very precise about what he said and to whom. She heard the word Ferretti. She heard the word shipment. She heard a date, the 23rd. And then Vittorio's voice dropping in that particular way it dropped when he was not pleased with what he was hearing. And then she heard footsteps inside the office, moving toward the door. She turned and walked, not quickly, back toward the junction. Behind her she heard the office door open, and then Vittorio's voice. Elara! She stopped and turned. Are you lost? His voice was flat. Not unkind, but assessing. A little, she said. I haven't mapped this wing yet. A pause. She heard Sandro inside the office, not moving, waiting. This wing is the working area, Vittorio said. I'd prefer you stay to the east and south wings during the day. Of course, she said. I apologize. She turned and walked back the way she had come, and did not look like she was hurrying. But she had what she needed. She had the name Ferretti, a date, and the tone of a man who was under pressure from a direction he wasn't fully controlling. She started connecting it to the conversation she had heard through the wall 2 nights earlier. By the time she reached her room, she had the rough shape of it. Not proof. Not yet. But shape. She spent the evening in the study Vittorio had mentioned, sitting in the chair near the window, not reading, not listening to anything, thinking, letting the information she had gathered arrange itself into the pattern she needed it to be in. She thought about Marco's voice through the wall. That phrase, eliminate, and the careful way he had shaped it, the tongue click before the word. She thought about the man with the nasal accent, the outside voice, someone not from this house. She thought about the date, the 23rd, which was 9 days away. She thought about the word Ferretti, which she had heard once before, in a different context from the retired city official whose home she had visited, a rival organization, he had said, with some distaste, powerful in the north, expanding south. And she thought about what it meant that Marco Bellandi, Vittorio's second-in-command of 12 years, was arranging timelines and meetings with someone who spoke in a voice that didn't belong to this organization. She was still sitting there when Vittorio appeared in the doorway at 9:47. He didn't knock. She had noticed he didn't knock on open doors, only closed ones, but one of those small habitual rules people lived by without examining. You've been in here for 3 hours, he said. Is there a rule about that? No? Then yes. I've been in here for 3 hours. She heard him step into the room. One step, then he stopped, keeping distance in a way she was beginning to understand was habitual for him. He didn't close space with people. He maintained a perimeter. It said something about how he had learned to exist in the world, though she hadn't decided exactly what yet. I owe you an apology, he said. That was unexpected enough that she turned her head slightly. For what? This afternoon, in the West Corridor, I was abrupt. You were direct, she said. Those aren't the same thing. In this case, they were. She considered that. Why are you apologizing? Because it's the right thing to do. His voice was flat when he said it, which made it more convincing, not less. It wasn't performance. It was a statement of a principle he actually held. She hadn't expected that either. She was beginning to find that Vittorio De Luca kept surprising her, which was unusual because she was very good at predicting people. Accepted, she said. He moved to the bookshelf along the near wall. She tracked his path by sound, and she heard him take something down. A book, from the weight of the sound it made. What are you actually thinking about? He said. When you sit like that. Like what? Like you're running a calculation. She almost smiled again. Almost. I think about most things the way other people see them, as a structure, cause and effect, pattern. And what pattern are you working on right now? She held the pause for 2 full seconds, which was longer than she usually held anything. You, she said. The room was very quiet. She heard his hand tighten on the book. That's not particularly reassuring, he said. I didn't mean it to be. What have you worked out? That you're under pressure from a direction you're not looking at, she said, and that the reason you're not looking at it is because it's coming from someone you trust. The silence this time was different, tighter. She heard his breathing change. Not much, the smallest possible shift, but she had been listening to his breathing for 5 days, and she knew what his baseline was. That's a significant thing to say, he said. Yes. Based on what? Based on everything I've heard since I arrived in this house. Another silence. She heard him set the book down on the shelf, not replacing it exactly where it had come from, setting it down, which meant his hands needed to do something while his mind worked. If you have something specific to tell me, he said carefully, tell me. I don't have specific yet, she said. I have pattern. I need more time. How much time? I don't know yet. She heard him exhale. Not frustration, something more complicated than frustration. What do you need from me? He said. I need you to not do anything differently. Not yet. Act the way you've been acting. Whatever decisions you have coming, don't make them faster than you would normally make them. That's an unusual request. I'm in an unusual situation. He was quiet for a long moment. She heard him move back toward the door. 1 step, 2, and then he stopped. Alara. His voice had lost the careful professional flatness it usually carried. Not softer, exactly. More direct somehow, which was interesting because he was already a very direct man. If you're right about what you're saying, about someone I trust, I know what that means, she said. Do you? Yes. She kept her hands flat in her lap. It means you've been living with a danger you didn't know was a danger. And that's a particular kind of alone. I know what that's like. The silence that followed that was the longest one yet. I'll be careful, he said finally. Please, she said. Be more than careful. He left. She heard his footsteps all the way down the hall and up the stairs, and then they were gone, swallowed by the size of the house. She sat in the chair and let herself feel, for exactly 30 seconds, the weight of what she had just done. She had shown him something real. Not evidence, not information. Herself. The way she actually worked. The shape of her mind. That was a risk she had not planned to take this soon, and she was not entirely certain what had made her take it. She decided she would think about that later. Right now she needed to think about Marco, because 3 hours later, at 12:51 in the morning, she heard something that ended any remaining uncertainty about his timeline. She was in bed but not asleep when the footsteps came down the east corridor. Not Petra this time, not household staff. 2 sets of footsteps, both male, both moving with the practiced quiet of men who had learned not to be heard. They stopped outside her door. She did not move. She lay completely still and breathed slowly and listened with everything she had. She talked to him tonight. Marco's voice, very low. She had never heard him this low. A voice stripped of its professional smoothness down to something rawer and colder beneath it. For how long? The second voice, someone she didn't recognize. New. Not from the household. Long enough? A pause. She's faster than I thought. We can't wait for the 23rd. What are you saying? I'm saying the timeline moves. Another pause, and she heard something in his breathing, something that was almost like excitement, which was worse than anger would have been. The Voss woman becomes the problem she was always going to become. We use her, frame her, give Vittorio a reason to throw her out before she gets further in. And if he doesn't, then we make sure he has no choice. The footsteps moved away from her door. She heard them recede down the corridor and then down the stairs, and then nothing. She lay in the dark with her hands flat on her sternum and her heart rate at a place she was very deliberately working to bring back down. They were going to move against her family, against whatever tenuous, complicated thing had begun forming between her and the man at the head of this organization. A man who had, 12 years ago, put his trust in someone who had spent every day since then learning how to use it against him. The 23rd was 9 days away. But the timeline had just moved. She did not know to when. She had one advantage they did not know about, which was that she had just heard their entire conversation, and she had a memory that did not lose things. She had one disadvantage she was only beginning to understand, which was that for the first time in 5 years, she had let someone see past the cane and the stillness and the careful architecture of her composure. And whatever that meant, whatever it would cost her, she could not take it back. She did not sleep after that. She lay in the dark and ran the conversation back through her mind the way she ran everything. Not emotionally, not yet. There would be time for that later, or there would not be time for it at all. But structurally, the way you examined the load-bearing elements of something before deciding whether it could still stand. The timeline had moved. She didn't know to when. That was the variable she could not account for, and variables she could not account for were the only things that genuinely frightened her. By 4 in the morning, she had made 3 decisions. The first was that she needed to find the outside man, the one with the nasal accent and the tongue click, before Marco used him. The second was that she needed something concrete, something she could put in front of Vittorio that was not just her word against Marco's 12 years of loyalty. The third was that she needed to do both of those things faster than Marco expected her to move, which meant she needed to stop being careful and start being something else. She got up at 5, dressed, sat at the desk in her room and thought about the name Ferretti, and the date the 23rd, and the word eliminate, and the particular way Marco's voice had sounded in the corridor, that cold, stripped-down version of him, the one without the professional surface. She thought about Vittorio saying, "I'll be careful," and herself saying, "Be more than careful," and the silence that had followed. At 6:15, she heard Vittorio's footsteps on the main staircase, moving faster than usual. Something had happened or was happening. She opened her door and stepped into the hallway. He was at the far end, moving toward the west wing. He stopped when he heard her door. "Stay in your room today," he said. Not a request. "What happened?" "Nothing that concerns you." "Vittorio." She said his name the way she had learned to say things that needed to land. Level, without inflection, no appeal in it. Just wait. "What happened?" A pause. She heard him turn fully toward her. The house was quiet enough that she could hear his breathing from 12 feet away. "One of my men was found this morning," he said. "Outside the east gate. He's alive. Someone wanted him alive enough to not finish it." Another pause. "It's a message." "From Ferretti," she said. The silence that followed was absolute. She heard him take 4 steps toward her. Then he stopped. "Say that again," he said. "Ferretti, the rival organization operating from the north. You've been expecting some kind of move from them around the 23rd, something related to a shipment." She kept her voice even. "I heard you and Sandro 2 days ago. I wasn't trying to... I was in the corridor. I heard enough." The silence stretched. She heard his jaw tighten. Not literally, but the quality of his breathing changed the way it changed when he was holding something in. "I told you that wing was off limits," he said. "You told me after." "The message wasn't from Ferretti," she said. "Or it was, but it wasn't Ferretti's idea. Someone gave them the location of your man, someone who knew where he'd be this morning." Another silence. Longer. "That's an accusation," he said. "It's a pattern," she said. "I need you to hear it." "I'm listening." His voice had gone very flat. The flatness of a man who was angry and was choosing, with visible effort, not to be angry yet. "The conversation I overheard 2 nights ago through the study wall, it wasn't your organization talking to Ferretti's people. It was someone inside your organization creating the conditions for Ferretti to move, manufacturing a reason. The man this morning, whoever he is, whatever he knows, his location was given away deliberately to create exactly the crisis you're standing in right now." She heard Vittorio exhale through his nose. Once. Controlled. "Who?" he said. She opened her mouth, and that was when she heard the footsteps on the staircase behind him, measured, unhurried, the particular pace of a man who already knew what he was walking into. Marco Belandi said, "I'm sorry to interrupt." His voice was smooth again. The professional surface was back, every layer of it. He sounded concerned, appropriately grave. He sounded like a man who had come to his leader in a moment of crisis and was prepared to help carry the weight of it. She heard him reach the top of the staircase. heard him stop a few feet behind Vittorio. "We have a situation," Marco said to Vittorio. Not to her. She was furniture again. "I've been trying to reach you for the last hour." "I'm aware of the situation," Vittorio said. "Then you should also be aware." Marco paused, and she heard it, the half-second of recalibration, the way he adjusted his approach in real time based on what he'd walked in on. "I've been doing some investigation this morning, since we found Enzo." A pause. "There are some things you need to see. Documents concerning the Voss family's involvement with the Ferretti organization." The temperature of the hallway changed, not literally, but she felt it. The shift in the air, the way Vittorio went very still in front of her. "What documents?" Vittorio said. "Communications, financial records, going back 18 months. Marco's voice was measured, careful, deeply, precisely concerned. "I didn't want to bring this to you without being certain, but after this morning, I think you need to see them now." Alara stood very still. She had known this was coming. She had known it since she heard them outside her door. We use her, frame her, give Vittorio a reason to throw her out. She had known it, and she had told herself she had time, and she had been wrong because the timeline had moved, and she had not moved fast enough. "Vittorio," she said. "Not now," he said. "The documents are fabricated." She said it cleanly, no apology in it, nothing that could be read as uncertainty. "Whatever he's bringing you was created to look like my family made a deal with Ferretti. It wasn't. My father doesn't have the connections, the resources, or the intelligence to arrange anything with an organization of that scale. You know that. You vetted him before you accepted the debt arrangement." Marco said, with respect. "Let her finish," Vittorio said. Something in Marco's breathing changed. She catalogued it. "The man outside the gate this morning, Enzo. What does he know?" she said. "What information does he carry that someone would want suppressed or discredited?" A pause. Then Vittorio said, "He handles logistics for the Northern Corridor, scheduling, routes, timing. Then whoever gave him up did it because he knows when and where the 23rd shipment moves." She turned her head slightly toward where she'd placed Marco. "And if he's discredited, or if attention is redirected toward my family as a source of the leak, the real source stays protected." Silence. Marco said, "This is a blind woman who has been in this house for 6 days telling you how your organization works." His voice was still measured, still smooth, but there was something underneath it now. "I've given 12 years to you, Vittorio. 12 years, and you're listening to—" I said, "Let her finish." Marco went quiet. She heard his hands. Something subtle, the faint sound of fabric against skin, his fingers closing at his sides. "I need to see those documents," she said, "before Vittorio does. I can tell you within 2 minutes whether they're real." "How?" Marco said. "How would you possibly—" "Because I know my father's financial history better than anyone alive," she said. "Every account, every transaction, every relationship he had in the business community before he lost everything. If those documents reference real transactions, I'll know. If they reference fabricated ones, I'll know that too." She paused. "Unless you'd rather not have them tested." The hallway was absolutely silent. Then Vittorio said, "Show her the documents, Marco." The silence that followed was 3 seconds long. She counted each one. "Of course," Marco said. They went to the West Wing study, the 3 of them, and the documents were real paper. She could tell by the sound and weight of them when the folder was placed in front of her, which Marco did with a deliberateness that told her he wanted her to feel the absurdity of the gesture. A blind woman handed evidence she couldn't read. "Carla," Vittorio said, and Carla appeared from somewhere behind them. She had been summoned, Alara realized, before this meeting, which told her Vittorio had been operating on a different level of preparation than he had shown. "Read them to her." Marco said nothing. She heard his stillness, the particular held quality of a man watching something he had not accounted for. Carla read them. All of it. The letterhead. A financial services company she had never heard of. The account numbers, the dates, the transaction descriptions. Alara listened without interrupting. When Carla finished, she sat for a moment with her hands on the table. "The account numbers follow a format that changed in this country's banking system 14 months ago," she said. The format in those documents is the old one. Whoever created them used a template that predated the regulatory change. She paused. My father's actual accounts were migrated to the new format 11 months ago. I know because I helped him with the paperwork. These numbers don't match his real accounts, and they're formatted incorrectly for anything created in the last year. The room was quiet. Then Marco said, "That's a very convenient explanation." "Test it," she said. "Call the bank. Request verification of the account format migration date. It will take 20 minutes. Vittorio said, "Make the call, Carla." Carla left the room, and Marco Belandi, for the first time since she had arrived in this house, stopped being smooth. "You've been working toward this since you got here," he said. His voice had changed, not loud but stripped, the professional surface cracking along lines that had always been there. "You came in here with an agenda." "I came in here because your boss accepted a debt arrangement from my father," she said. "I didn't choose this. You've been mapping the house, talking to the staff, listening at walls." "I listen everywhere," she said. "That's not a crime." "You're manipulating him." The words came faster now, the careful pacing gone. "You've got him half convinced you're some kind of asset, some oracle, and he's losing his judgment because of it, and it is going to get people killed. Marco." Vittorio's voice cut through the room like something physical. Silence. "Sit down," Vittorio said. "Vittorio, I am telling you. Sit down." She heard the chair move, heard Marco lower himself into it, and the quality of that movement, reluctant, furious, the controlled descent of a man who was not accustomed to being silenced, told her more about him than anything she'd observed in the past 6 days. They waited for Carla. 17 minutes. She tracked them by the clock in the hallway, the same one she'd used to orient herself on her second day in the house. Carla came back and confirmed it. The migration date. The format change. Everything Alara had said checked out. Vittorio said nothing for a long moment. Then he said, "Leave us." Carla left. Marco did not move. "You too," Vittorio said. "Vittorio." "Marco. I will speak with you in an hour. Go." The sound of Marco standing, the sound of him walking to the door, and at the door he paused. She heard the pause, the brief hesitation of a man deciding whether to say one more thing. And then he left, and his footsteps went down the hall, measured even, betraying nothing. She and Vittorio were alone in the study. He didn't speak right away. She heard him move to the window. The same faint shift in air pressure and ambient sound differential she'd clocked in his first-floor study a week ago. A man who went to windows when he needed to think. "How long have you known it was him?" he said. "I've suspected since the second day," she said. "I've known since the night before last." "And you didn't tell me." "I didn't have proof. I had pattern. You would have gone to him directly, and he would have denied it, and you would have had to choose between your certainty and 12 years. A long pause. "You were protecting me from making the wrong choice," he said. "I was protecting both of us from a situation we couldn't survive if we moved too soon." She heard him turn from the window. "What else do you know?" he said. "Enough," she said. "Not everything. There's someone he's working with, someone outside the organization. I've heard the voice, but I don't have a name or an affiliation. I know the timeline was the 23rd, but it moved last night. I don't know to when." She paused. "I need more time and access I haven't had." "What access?" "The personnel files. I need someone to read me the employment records for anyone brought on in the last 18 months. There's someone in this house who's been feeding information outward. Not Petra. She was used without understanding what she was part of. Someone else. Someone who arrived with a reference Marco provided." She heard Vittorio's breath change. "He brought 3 people in last year," Vittorio said slowly. "All vetted, all with references I checked personally." "Did you check them through your own contacts or through Marco's?" The silence that answered her was answer enough. "I'll pull the files," he said. "This afternoon," she said. "It needs to be this afternoon." "Alara." His voice had that quality again, the one she had heard the night before, the one beneath the flatness, the layer that was something other than professional. If what you're describing is what I think it is, what Marco has been building, this goes back longer than 6 days. This goes back longer than I've been here, she said. Yes, I know. That means he's been... He stopped. Planning to take your organization from you, she said. Yes, for long enough to build relationships with Ferretti, long enough to have people in place, long enough to have a timeline. She paused. The fact that my arrival accelerated that timeline is the only advantage we have. He wasn't ready. He had to move faster than he planned, and fast movements leave more evidence than slow ones. Another long silence. Why are you doing this? He said. The question caught her slightly off guard because of its directness. Not suspicion in it. Genuine asking. Because I live here now, she said. Because what happens to you happens to me. And because... She stopped for a moment, which she almost never did. Because I am very tired of being the person people decide isn't worth worrying about. She heard him cross the room, not toward the door, toward her. He stopped 3 feet from her, which was closer than he had ever stood, and she heard his breathing, and it was not the controlled professional baseline she had cataloged. It was something more unsteady than that. I owe you an apology, he said, a real one. Not like this morning. For what specifically? For every assumption I made when you arrived. A pause. Every one. She did not say it was fine because it hadn't been fine, and he deserved not to have it softened. I know, she said. He stayed near her for a moment longer and then moved away, back toward the desk, back toward the work of dismantling something he had trusted for 12 years. And that was when the door opened. She heard 2 sets of footsteps, heavy, both of them, the weight distribution of men who carried things under their jackets, and Marco's voice. And it was not the smooth voice, and it was not the stripped voice she had heard in the corridor. It was a third voice she had not heard from him yet. Quiet. Decided. I'm sorry, Marco said. I am genuinely sorry for this. She heard Vittorio turn. She heard the sound of something being placed on the desk. Not paper, not a folder, something heavier. The particular density of an object with mass. There's no version of this conversation that ends with you running this organization, Marco said. There hasn't been for a long time. I've been patient. I gave you 12 years, Vittorio, 12 years of my life building something I was supposed to inherit, and you kept holding on. He stopped. Then, more controlled, the Ferretti deal is already done. The transfer of Northern Corridor operations happens in 4 days. You can either step back from this gracefully or what? Vittorio said. His voice was dangerously quiet. Or the woman's family becomes collateral. A pause. Your choice. The room went cold. Alara sat completely still and felt, beneath the cold calculation that had governed her for the last 6 days, something that was not calculation at all. Something with edges. Something that had not had a reason to exist until the last several days and was now fully awake and was not interested in being patient. You'll leave her family out of this, Vittorio said. I will if you cooperate. Marco. 4 days, Marco said. Think about it. And then the footsteps, all of them, Marco and the 2 heavy men, moved to the door and out of it, and she heard them go down the corridor, unhurried, completely unhurried, and she understood that Marco had just done the thing she had been most afraid of. He had made his move before she had enough, and Vittorio, standing behind the desk in the silence that followed, said nothing for a very long time. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost every layer she had cataloged over the past 6 days, every managed register, every professional control. It was just a voice, just a man. What do we do? He said. And Alara, who had never once in her life relied on anyone to help her navigate a danger she had already mapped, felt the word "we" land somewhere in her chest and stay there. We have 4 days, she said. That's not much. It's enough. She stood up from the chair. But I need you to do something you haven't done yet. What? Trust me completely, she said. Not provisionally, not with reservations, all the way. Because what I'm going to ask you to do is going to feel wrong, and if you hesitate at the moment when it matters, we lose everything. Vittorio De Luca was silent for a long time. Then he said, "Tell me what you need." She opened her mouth to answer, and her phone, the one she kept in her pocket, the one almost no one in this house knew she carried, vibrated twice. She knew before she answered it. She knew from the timing, from the particular sequence of events that had just unfolded, from every pattern she had been running since she arrived. She answered it. Her father's voice, when it came through the line, was not the hollow, guilty voice she had heard in the apartment doorway a week ago. It was broken, completely and without reserve broken, the voice of a man who had just had something taken from him that he had not understood was vulnerable. "They have your sister," Ronaldo Voss said. Alara stopped breathing for exactly 3 seconds. She had not told Vittorio she had a sister. She had not told anyone in this house. Her sister, 23 years old, living across the city in a studio apartment she had moved into 8 months ago. A fact that existed in no document Alara had brought with her, in no conversation she had had inside these walls, in nothing Marco could have found in any record connected to the Voss family debt, which meant the outside man, the voice with the nasal accent, the tongue click, had been watching her family for longer than any of this, which meant this was not about the 23rd. It had never been about the 23rd. The 23rd was a distraction. The real move had always been this: wait until Alara got close enough to become a problem, and then take the one thing that would make her stop. She lowered the phone from her ear. Vittorio was watching her. She knew it from the quality of the silence in the room, the particular stillness of a person who has seen something change in another person's face and is waiting to understand what it means. "What happened?" he said. She had spent 5 years building a self that did not need rescue, that did not expose its soft places, that moved through every dangerous situation with the full armor of what she knew and how she listened and how she thought. She stood in the middle of that study and felt every piece of that armor become, in the space of one phone call, a liability. Because the person who had taken her sister had done it knowing exactly what it would cost her. And the only way to get her sister back was to stop being careful entirely, which was the one thing Alara Voss did not know how to do. And the one thing she was going to have to learn in the next 4 days, or lose everything she had not known until 6 days ago that she was capable of wanting. She stood with the phone at her side and let herself feel it for exactly 5 seconds. 5 seconds of the thing underneath all the listening and the mapping and the careful architecture of how she had learned to survive. 5 seconds of her sister's face, not seen, she hadn't seen it in 4 years, but remembered from before, from the last time the world had been a different shape. 23 years old, dark hair, laughed too loudly in restaurants, called Alara every Sunday morning at 9 o'clock without fail, even during the months after the accident when Alara had not always answered. 5 seconds. Then she put it away. "They have my sister," she said to Vittorio. "Her name is Mara. She lives alone. She has nothing to do with any of this." She heard him move, quick, decisive, toward the door. "I'll call." "Wait." Her voice stopped him. "If you mobilize your people right now, whoever is holding her will know immediately that we know. They're watching this house. They've been watching it. The call to my father was timed. It came 90 seconds after Marco left this room, which means someone outside saw Marco walk out of this building and made the call the moment they confirmed the conversation had happened." Vittorio stopped. "They're coordinated," he said, "completely, which means any move we make that looks like a response, they'll read instantly." She turned the phone over in her hands. The case was worn at the corners. She knew it by touch, the way she knew everything. "I need to think for 60 seconds. Don't do anything for 60 seconds. He was quiet. She heard him hold himself still the way he held himself still during their conversations in the study. That managed restraint, the control that sat on top of something much less controlled underneath. She thought. Marco's timeline had moved because of her. The sister was leverage, not a punishment, leverage, which meant they still needed her cooperative or at minimum non-disruptive for whatever was happening on the 23rd. Mara would not be harmed before the 23rd, probably not during it. She was insurance, and insurance only paid if you kept it intact. That gave her 4 days. It gave her 4 days, and it gave her the knowledge that Marco, despite everything, had been forced to improvise. He had not planned to take Mara when he planned the original timeline. The original timeline did not require leverage, because in the original timeline, Alara had never gotten close enough to Vittorio to become a problem. She had been faster than he expected, and fast men who had been forced to improvise made mistakes that slow, careful men did not make. "I need the personnel files," she said. "Right now, today. I need to know who Marco brought in, and I need someone I trust to read them to me. Not Carla. Carla reports to the household, and I don't know yet who in the household is feeding information out." "Sandro," Vittorio said immediately. "He's been with me since before Marco, since the beginning. Get him." "And your sister?" "I know where she is," Alara said. A silence. "How?" Vittorio said. "Because I asked her once when she took the apartment to tell me the building, the cross streets, the floor, the position of her unit relative to the stairwell." She paused. "She thought I was being overprotective. I thought I was being overprotective. I filed it anyway." She paused again. "I file everything." She heard something in his exhale. Not quite a sound, more the absence of sound, the particular quality of a breath that was almost something else. "Sandro," he said, and took out his phone. Sandro came within 8 minutes. She heard him in the doorway. The careful footsteps of an older man, unhurried, but with a tenseness in the gait that told her Vittorio had given him the shape of the situation before he arrived. "Miss Voss," Sandro said. "The 3 personnel files Marco submitted in the last 18 months, she said. "I need you to read them to me. All of it. Names, dates, prior employment, references, everything. I'll need to pull them from the archive. How long?" 10 minutes. "Go." Sandro went. Vittorio moved to the desk. She heard him sit, finally, the first time she had heard him sit during a crisis, which told her something about the state of him. She heard him pour something from a bottle on the desk, 1 glass. He did not offer her any, which she respected. This was not a moment for courtesy gestures. "If Sandro reads you the files," Vittorio said, "what are you looking for?" "References," she said. "Marco's contacts outside this organization, the ones I know about, they're not from the legitimate business community. They're operational people, which means the references he provided for these employees will be operational people pretending to be legitimate. There will be inconsistencies, addresses that don't match business registration records, names that are too clean, no secondary associations, no history that extends far enough back. You can identify that from hearing it read aloud." "I can identify patterns, yes." A pause. "What did you do before this?" he said. "Before your father's situation. Before I worked for an insurance investigation firm," she said. "Fraud assessment. 4 years. I was very good at it." Silence. "Of course you were," he said. Sandro came back in 9 minutes, not 10. She heard him pull a chair close, heard the sound of folders opening, and she sat down across from him and listened. It took 45 minutes. Sandro read carefully, precisely, pausing when she asked him to repeat something, never asking why, never editorializing. She tracked everything: the employer names, the addresses, the dates of reference letters, the contact numbers provided. By the end, she had 3 things. The first was a company name, Norden Logistics, listed as the prior employer of a man named Cole Drayden, who had been brought on as a route coordinator 7 months ago on Marco's recommendation. Norden Logistics had a business registration in the city, but the address listed was a postal box, not a physical office. She knew because the format of the address, as Sandro read it, matched postal box formats she had encountered during her insurance work. Not a business, a shell. The second was a phone number in the reference letter for a second employee, a man named Barris, which shared the first 6 digits with the number Marco had called from outside her room the night she'd overheard him. She had memorized that number from the faint sound of his keypad. Old phone, physical keys, each digit had a slightly different tone. She was not certain, but she was close to certain. The third was the name on the reference for Cole Drayden, the name of the person who had supposedly employed him at Norden Logistics. The name was Ferretti. Not the organization, a person. A first name initial and a last name, F. Ferretti. She sat with that for a moment. Cole Drayden, she said. Where is he right now? Today? Sandro said, route coordinators work out of the logistics office on the south property. He'd be there. I need to speak with him. Vittorio said, Elara. Not confrontationally, she said. I need to be near him for 5 minutes. I need to hear him speak. She paused. If he's the inside contact, the one feeding route information to Ferretti's people, the one who helped Marco expose Enzo's location this morning, I will know within 5 minutes of hearing his voice. How? Because I heard the outside voice through the wall 3 days ago. I have it memorized. Vittorio and Sandro were quiet. Then Vittorio said, the south property is a 20-minute drive. Then we should leave now. They went in Vittorio's car without the usual escort, just the three of them, Sandro driving, Elara in the back, Vittorio beside her. She heard him working his phone the entire drive, low voice, clipped sentences, moving pieces she couldn't fully see but could partially hear. He was pulling men into position without making it visible. He was, she realized, genuinely good at this, at managing the controlled escalation of a crisis without letting the crisis see itself being managed. She had been underestimating him too, in her way. The south property was a converted warehouse space. She could tell from the acoustics the moment she stepped inside. The particular way sound moved in a high-ceilinged industrial space. The smell of concrete and diesel and something chemical underneath. Busy. She counted at least 12 people from the ambient noise. Probably more. Vittorio said something to a man near the entrance. Brief, businesslike. And then they moved through the space, and she tracked it as she always tracked new spaces, logging the distances and surfaces and positions. The man named Cole Drayden was at a desk in the back section, separated from the main floor by a half-wall partition. She heard him before they reached the partition. He was on a phone call, speaking in a low voice. Nothing remarkable in the content, something about a delivery window. But she stopped walking 12 feet from the partition, and she stood very still. The voice. First 6 words and she had it, the slight nasality, the particular way the vowels sat in the mouth. The tongue click before the word window. She reached for Vittorio's arm. Found it, gripped it once, released it. He understood immediately. She heard him shift his weight, heard the change in his breathing. They stood there and let Cole Drayden finish his call. He came around the partition 30 seconds later and stopped. She heard the specific sound of a person stopping because they were not expecting what they found. Not just Vittorio, the combination of Vittorio and the woman with the cane and Sandro behind them all, filling the narrow corridor between the partition and the outer wall. Mr. DeLuca, Cole Drayden said. Smooth, practiced. The particular smoothness of someone who had been trained to be smooth. Didn't know you were coming down today. Unexpected visit, Vittorio said. Easy, relaxed. What can I do for you? Elara said, tell me about Norden Logistics. A beat, very small. Most people would have missed it. Sorry? Cole Drayden said. Norden Logistics, your prior employer. The postal address on file for them. Box 417 on Crescent Street. I'm trying to reach someone there. She kept her voice conversational, curious. Do you have a direct contact number? I've tried the main line and it doesn't connect. Another beat, longer. It's been a while since I've been in touch with anyone there. Of course, she said. That makes sense. She paused. One more thing. Did you know a man named Enzo? He works the North Corridor. Security rotation. The silence that followed was exactly 1.5 seconds. She counted each quarter of it. He was found outside the East Gate this morning, she said. Someone gave up his location and his rotation timing. That's very specific information, the kind a route coordinator would have access to. Cole Drayden did not answer. In the silence, she heard his breathing change, the shallow, rapid shift of a person whose body had understood the situation before their mind had caught up. Vittorio, he said, and the smoothness was gone entirely. He was addressing Vittorio directly now, over her, as though she had stopped existing. I don't know what she's told you. She hasn't told me anything yet, Vittorio said. She asked you a question. A sound. Cole Drayden's weight shifting, his feet repositioning, calculating distance to the exit. She mapped it before he did. There's no exit behind you that isn't covered, she said quietly. Sandro, could you move to the left slightly? She heard Sandro move. She heard Cole Drayden understand that he had been closed in. What happened next happened fast. He moved. She heard it, the sudden shift of full body weight in motion. And she stepped to the right exactly far enough, and Vittorio was already moving, and there was a sound of impact, of someone hitting the partition wall, and then Sandro's voice saying, "Stay there," and the controlled chaos of 3 seconds that resolved into a quiet that was much tenser than the quiet before. Cole Drayden was breathing hard against the wall. She heard Vittorio's breathing, elevated, not out of control, the breathing of a man who knew how to absorb physical confrontation without being destabilized by it. "Where's the girl?" Vittorio said. "Mara Voss. Where are they holding her?" "Nothing." "I will ask you once more," Vittorio said. His voice had dropped to a register she had not heard from him before. Not loud. The opposite of loud. The voice of someone who had gone past the place where volume was useful. "I want a deal," Cole Drayden said, breathing hard. "I want protection. Marco finds out I talked." "Marco is not your problem right now," Vittorio said. "I am." A pause. Then an address. A street, a building number, a unit. She memorized it before he finished the sentence. Vittorio straightened up. She heard him. The physical recalibration, the weight settling, the breath evening out. "Sandro, stay with him." And then to her quietly, "Come with me." They went back through the warehouse floor. She tracked the exit the same way she had tracked the entrance, and then outside. And she heard him on the phone before they reached the car, giving the address, giving instructions. And the instructions were careful and specific in a way that told her he had thought about this before she'd given him the address, had already built the approach in his mind, had been ready. She got in the car. He got in beside her, and they drove. He did not speak for the first several minutes. She tracked the route, north, then east, then north again, moving through what she estimated was a transitional part of the city, mixed commercial and residential, the particular acoustic signature of neighborhoods that hadn't decided yet what they wanted to be. "You knew it was him the moment he spoke," Vittorio said. "Yes? How long have you been able to do that?" "Since about 6 months after the accident," she said. "You develop compensation mechanisms. Mine went in this direction." A silence. "I'm sorry," he said, "about the accident." "You didn't cause it." "I know. I'm sorry anyway." She let that sit. The building where they were holding Mara was a 7-story residential structure with a parking structure on the east side. She built this picture from what she heard as Vittorio's car joined 2 others she hadn't known were following until she heard their engines synchronize behind them as they turned onto the block. He'd had people in position before she'd even given him the address. He'd been moving them into place during the drive from the south property. She had been underestimating him. She would stop doing that. "You're not coming in," he said. "I know." A pause. He had clearly prepared for an argument. "You know." "I'll be more useful here," she said. "I can track communications. If Marco has contact with whoever is inside that building, if he moves while your people are in there, I'll hear it." She held up the phone. Cole Drayden's phone. "I took it during the confusion at the warehouse. I need someone to pull his recent contacts." Silence. She heard him take the phone from her hand, heard the sound of him handing it through the window to someone outside. The car window had gone down without her noticing him do it. He was precise, this man. Precise and fast when he needed to be fast. "Stay in the car," he said. "Yes? I mean it." "I know you mean it." She heard him get out of the car, heard the door close, heard 4 sets of footsteps moving toward the building. Vittorio and 3 others, their footsteps coordinated, the particular rhythm of men who had moved together in situations like this before. She sat in the car and listened to the city and listened to her own heartbeat and let herself, for the first time in 6 days, need something. She needed Mara to be all right. That was it. Everything else, the exposure of Marco, the protection of Vittorio, the survival of her own position in a house that had been a crisis since the moment she arrived, all of it was secondary to the simple, unguarded fact that she needed her sister to be all right. 12 minutes. She tracked them by the sounds outside the car, by the rhythm of her own breathing, by the distant city noise that told her nothing was happening in the immediate vicinity. No sirens, no additional vehicles. Then footsteps returning. And a voice. Familiar. Too loud. The laugh too loudly in restaurant's voice, tight with something that was trying to resolve itself into relief. And she had the car door open before she had consciously decided to open it. Elara! Mara's voice broke on the second syllable. She stepped out of the car and her sister reached her, and they stood on the sidewalk in the particular way of two people who had been a long time apart from the kind of certainty that the other person was intact, and neither of them said anything for a moment that was both very short and very long. Are you hurt? Elara said. No, scared, not hurt. Mara pulled back. They kept asking me about you, about what you knew, about who you'd been talking to. A pause. I didn't tell them anything because I don't know anything. I know. Elle, what is happening? I'll explain later. She pulled her sister back in briefly. I will explain everything later. Right now I need you to get in this car and stay there. Where are you going? I need to speak with Vittorio. She found him by sound. He was 15 feet away, to her left, on the phone, speaking with the particular velocity of a man managing simultaneous developments. She waited. He finished and came to her. 2 men inside, he said. They're being held. Marco is not picking up his phone. He'll have a fallback position, she said. When this didn't work, when your people extracted Mara, he'll move to whatever his backup plan is. He's had 12 years to build backup plans. I know where he'll go, Vittorio said. Where? There's a property, off the books. I've known about it for 3 years, never told him I knew. A pause. I was keeping it as a contingency. Then we go there. Elara, don't, she said. Don't tell me to stay in the car again. If Marco is at that property with the outside contacts, with whoever has been building this with him, you need me there. You need me to hear what they say before they know they've been found. You need me to know who's in the room before you go in. A silence. She heard him working through it, the resistance and the logic of it, and the particular difficulty of a man who wanted to protect someone and had been forced to acknowledge that the person he wanted to protect was more useful in the field than out of it. Fine, he said. Fine, she said. They left Mara with Sandro and 2 of Vittorio's men and drove. The off-books property was 40 minutes east, outside the city proper, past the point where the ambient sound changed from urban density to something more open and quiet. She tracked the change in road surface, in wind sound against the car, in the decreasing frequency of other vehicles. Vittorio drove this time. Sandro was gone, and so were the other cars, just the 2 of them. Tell me about the property, she said. Converted farmhouse, single structure. 1 main building, a detached garage to the northwest. Private road off the main highway, approximately 300 meters long. He purchased it through a company name I didn't recognize until I started tracking it back last year. How many exits from the main building? Front, back? 1 door on the east side that was added in the renovation. Windows? Older style, double hung. 6 on the ground floor, I think. More above. How many people does Marco typically move with? Depends. In a crisis, 4, maybe 6. She thought about that. He'll have the Ferretti contact with him, the person with authority to finalize the transfer of the northern corridor. That person will want to leave as fast as possible once they understand the situation is compromised. Marco will try to stall them. He needs the deal to finalize or he walks away from 12 years with nothing. So they'll be negotiating. Or arguing, yes. That buys us time. Some, she said. Not much. They turned off the highway. She heard the road surface change. Gravel. The same sound she'd heard pulling into the DeLuca mansion a week ago. A different texture, but the same fundamental acoustic quality of a private road that didn't want to be found. Vittorio cut the headlights. She knew because she heard the faint electrical sound of them disengaging. He slowed the car significantly, navigating by what she assumed was ambient light, taking it carefully. 300 meters of gravel. She counted the seconds. He stopped the car. In the silence that followed, she heard the farmhouse before she had any other information about it. Multiple voices, at least 4, possibly 5, coming from somewhere in the structure's interior. The sound of a door. Interior, not exterior, opening and closing. Someone moving with urgency between rooms. And Marco's voice. Even at this distance, even muffled by walls, she caught the particular cadence of it. The smooth surface entirely gone. Something underneath that was fraying. "He's losing the argument," she said quietly. Vittorio said nothing. She heard him check something. His jacket, likely, the particular shift of a person who carries something at their side, and is confirming it is where it should be. "There's a second vehicle to the northwest," she said. "Hear it? The engine is still warm, ticking slightly as it cools. They drove here recently and haven't been here long." "The Ferretti contact," Vittorio said. "Probably, which means they have a way out that isn't back through the main road. Through the farmland behind the property, there's a service track." "Then we need to move now," she said, "before they decide the deal isn't worth the exposure and use that track to leave." Vittorio opened his door. She opened hers. "Elara?" "I stay at the perimeter," she said. "I listen. If someone comes out a side exit, I tell you." He held for a half second. "Stay behind the car until I've reached the building," he said. "Then move to the east side. The door on the east will be the most likely secondary exit if someone runs," she said. "I know." She heard him exhale. They moved. The gravel was the challenge. She walked the way she walked when she needed to be quiet, weight redistributed, cane held above the surface, each step placed with the full attention she would normally divide across a dozen things. The air was cold and smelled like turned earth and the particular sharpness of early night in open country. She counted steps, tracked distance, heard the voices in the building grow more distinct as she got closer. Marco was speaking in rapid, clipped sentences, and a second voice was answering in a tone that was trying to remain calm and was failing at it. And a third voice, unfamiliar, older, with an accent she placed as coming from somewhere much further away, was saying something that had the finality of a closing statement. She reached the east side of the building. She pressed her back against the exterior wall and felt the old stone of it, cold through her jacket, and she listened to the interior with everything she had. Marco was describing the Ferretti deal in terms that were increasingly desperate. The timeline, the northern corridor value, the 12 years of groundwork. The calm, failing voice was pushing back. Too exposed, too compromised. The woman was still in the DeLuca house, and the asset in the south property was gone, and this was over. "Marco, this is over." And the older accented voice said, calmly, and with the authority of someone who had ended things before and was not particularly troubled by doing it again, "We should not have come here. I am leaving. I suggest you make your peace with what comes next." Footsteps. Moving toward the east side of the building, moving toward the door 3 feet from where she was standing. She pressed harder against the wall and thought very fast. If she moved, they would hear her on the gravel. If she stayed, whoever came through that door would find her in the first 2 seconds. She stayed. The door opened. She heard the older accented voice say, to someone behind him, "This was always going to end this way." And then his footsteps on the gravel, turning north toward the vehicle. And then a hand closed around her arm. Not hard. Not threatening. She recognized the grip in the first fraction of a second, the particular pressure and position of it, the temperature, the specific way it closed around her forearm rather than her wrist. Vittorio. He had come around the east side before the door opened. He was standing 1 foot to her right, pressed against the wall in the same position, and he had found her in the dark the way you found things you had been paying very close attention to. They stood against the wall together while the older man's footsteps moved away in the dark, and she heard, from inside the building now, the sound of something going wrong. A crash. Something heavy falling. Marco's voice rising above the controlled register it had maintained for 12 years, finally, at last, losing everything that had held it in place. And then Vittorio moved. He released her arm, stepped around her, and went through the door. She heard the voices inside collapse into the particular chaos of a confrontation that had been building for 12 years and had finally, in a converted farmhouse at the edge of the city, run out of room to keep building. She stood at the door with her hand on the frame and listened and gave Vittorio what she could. The position of each voice, the direction of each movement, the specific acoustic signature of every person in that room, relayed in a low, continuous stream that she had never done before, had not known she could do in real time, and was doing now with the absolute focus of a person who had finally, completely, stopped being careful. Inside the building, Marco Bellandi's 12 years ended, not cleanly, not quietly, with the full uneven weight of something that had been held too long under too much pressure and had finally, at the worst possible moment for him and the only possible moment for everything else, given way. Elora stood at the door and listened to it happen and felt, underneath the cold focus, something that was not satisfaction. It was rawer than that, and less comfortable and more honest. She had been brought into this house as a payment, as a settled debt, as the blind daughter of a failed man, handed over to a stranger who had not wanted her any more than she had wanted to be handed. And now she was standing at the door of the room where the danger ended, and she had put herself there by choice, every step of it, every single one, and not one of those choices had been made for her. She heard Marco say Vittorio's name one final time, not with aggression, not with the remnants of the smooth professional surface, with something much simpler and much harder to hear than either of those things. She heard Vittorio answer him. She did not hear what he said. It was too quiet, and it was not meant for her. Some things were not meant for her. But she heard what came after, the particular silence of a confrontation that has reached its end, the specific quality of quiet that only existed when something that had been in motion for a very long time had finally, completely stopped. And then Vittorio's footsteps, coming back toward the door, coming back toward her. Vittorio came through the door and stopped. She heard him stop. The footsteps cut off, and he was simply there, 2 feet from her, breathing at a rate that was elevated but evening, the particular rhythm of a body coming down from something it had been pushed through. She heard him put something away, the specific sound of a thing being returned to where it was kept, deliberate, final. "It's done," he said. 2 words. She had learned in the past 7 days that Vittorio De Luca did not use 10 words when 2 would carry the weight. She had come to understand this as a form of precision rather than coldness, though the distinction had taken her longer to make than she was entirely comfortable admitting. "Marco?" she said. "Alive." A pause. "He'll answer for what he did. To the organization first, then through whatever legal channel his lawyers construct." Another pause, briefer. "I'm not my reputation." She had not asked him to clarify that. She noted that he had. "The Ferretti contact," she said. "Gone. He left through the back track before we had coverage on it." His voice was flat about this, not angry, the flatness of a man who had already calculated the loss and filed it. "He'll take back a report that the deal failed, that Marco's position collapsed. Ferretti's organization will move on. They had investment in Marco, not in the Northern Corridor specifically. There are easier corridors." "You know that for certain?" "I know their pattern. They don't commit resources to fights they've already lost." A pause. "I've been watching them for 3 years. She absorbed that. "You knew about the Ferretti connection before this week." "I knew there was a Ferretti connection to someone inside my organization. I didn't know who." A beat. "I was looking in the wrong direction." He did not say where he had been looking. She didn't ask. Some acknowledgments were enough without being completed. She heard him move, not away from her but to the side, turning so he was standing beside her rather than in front of her, both of them facing the open farmland in the dark. The cold had deepened in the hours since they'd arrived. She could feel it on her face. "Your sister's all right," he said. "I know. Sandro sent a message while I was inside." "I know. I heard your phone vibrate twice in the last 10 minutes. The second time you read something and your breathing changed in the way it changes when the news is better than expected." A silence. Then quietly, "You've been cataloging my breathing." "I catalog everything." Everything. It's not. She stopped. Started again. It becomes automatic. I'm not always aware I'm doing it. Is that. He stopped too. Two people stopping mid-sentence in the same exchange, she noted. That was new. They were both, for different reasons, navigating ground that their usual instruments didn't quite cover. Is it ever too much? He said finally. Hearing everything, all the time. She considered the question seriously because it deserved a serious answer, and because it was the first time anyone had asked it with genuine curiosity rather than pity or morbid interest. Sometimes, she said, in the first year after the accident, it was overwhelming. Too much information with no framework to sort it. I had to build the framework, she paused. Now it's just how I move through the world. It's not more than other people have. It's just arranged differently. He was quiet for a moment. You built the framework yourself. No one else was going to, and he absorbed that. She heard it in the quality of his stillness, a man absorbing something rather than deflecting it. We should go back, she said. Yes. Neither of them moved immediately. The farmland around them was very quiet, open country quiet, which was its own kind of loud, full of small sounds that cities buried. Wind across grass, something moving in the tree line to the north, the cooling engine of the Ferretti Contax vehicle, still ticking faintly from where it had been parked, now carrying the weight of an exit that had happened too fast for anyone to stop. My people will process this property in the morning, Vittorio said. Whatever Marco stored here, documents, financial records, communication logs, it'll all come out. It will be extensive, she said. Whatever he was building it carefully, 12 years of careful. I know. A pause. I keep trying to identify the moment I should have seen it. The specific thing I missed. You won't find it, she said. That's how it works with the people closest to you. They're closest to you because you chose to trust them, and the choice to trust someone is the thing that makes the evidence invisible. It's not a failure of intelligence. It's a function of relationship. He was quiet for a moment. That sounds like something you've thought about before. I have a blind spot, she said. It's different from yours, but I have one. She paused. I assumed for a long time that because I could hear what people were hiding, I didn't need to let them close enough to hide anything from me. I kept everyone at the distance where my listening worked best. A beat. This week was the first time in a long time I didn't do that. The quiet between them was different from the quiet they had occupied in various rooms over the past 7 days. Those had been the quiet of two people reading each other. This was something else, something that didn't need as much reading. Come on, he said. It's cold. They walked back to the car across the gravel, and this time she didn't lift her cane above the surface. She let it find the ground, let the sound of it on the gravel be what it was, and she walked beside him at a pace that was neither careful nor hurried, just the pace of two people walking across the same ground at the same time in the same direction. They were 40 minutes back to the city. She spent most of it thinking about what came next. Not strategically, not in the calculated, structural way she usually thought about next. Just sitting with the question in the dark of the car while the city grew back up around them, the sounds of it returning, the acoustic landscape of density and movement and human noise that she had been navigating her entire life. What came next was going to require different things from her than the last 7 days had required. The last 7 days had needed everything she had built in 5 years of careful, solo construction. What came next was going to need something she had deliberately, specifically, thoroughly avoided building. She was not sure she knew how. She suspected she was going to find out. Mara was in the De Luca mansion when they arrived. Sandro had brought her, which was, she would ask about that decision later. For now she heard her sister's voice from the main sitting room the moment she came through the front door, talking to someone in the careful, slightly too loud tone Mara used when she was pretending to be less frightened than she was. Alara went to the sitting room doorway. Elle. Mara's voice landed differently in an enclosed space. Fuller. Closer to itself. You look terrible. I can't see how I look. I can, and you look terrible. Your jacket's torn. She reached for her left sleeve and found the place where it had caught on something. The stone exterior of the farmhouse, she thought, when she'd pressed against it. A clean tear. About 3 inches. I liked this jacket, she said. I know you did. Mara crossed the room. She felt her sister reach her and stop just short of touching her, the way Mara had learned to approach her in the months after the accident, waiting to be met rather than reaching. Are you okay? Yes. Actually okay, or Alara Voss okay, which means you won't tell me if you're not. Both, I think. She reached out and found her sister's hand, held it for a moment. I'm sorry about tonight. Tonight wasn't your fault. I brought us into proximity with people who... Dad brought us into proximity with those people, Mara said. Her voice carried something that was not anger, exactly, more the bone tiredness of someone who had spent a long time organizing their feelings around a complicated person. You just tried to manage the situation he created, like you always do. Alara did not answer that. Mara was not wrong, and they both knew it, and that particular truth had been living between them for long enough that naming it again didn't add anything. Stay tonight, Alara said. The house is... There are rooms. It's safe. Are you sure it's safe? The reason it wasn't safe is no longer a reason. A pause. You're very calm about all of this. I process differently than you do. You process by not showing anything until it's over and then finding somewhere private to fall apart. Alara was quiet. I know you, Mara said. I've known you for 23 years. 23 years and 4 months, Alara said. She heard her sister exhale, the breath of someone who has been frightened for hours and is only now beginning to let it go, the long, slightly ragged exhale of returning safety. I'll stay, Mara said. Carla appeared from somewhere. She had the quality of appearing without having been summoned, which Alara had noted early on as a genuine skill, and took Mara to a room in the south wing, and Alara stood in the sitting room doorway and listened to their footsteps move up the stairs and fade. She stood there for a while. Then she went to find Vittorio. He was in the first-floor study, the one where they had first met, the one with the window on the far wall that she had mapped on the first day. She heard him before she reached the door. Not on the phone, not in conversation, just the sound of a person in a room, the ambient noise of presence and thought. She knocked. Not because the door was closed, it was open, but because she felt like knocking. Come in, he said. She came in. She found the chair she had stood in front of 7 days ago when he had told her she was the largest variable he currently had, and she sat down in it, which she had not done then. He said nothing. She heard him across the room, near the window probably, though not as close to it as he usually stood. The organization, she said. What happens now? There are 3 men who were loyal to Marco and knew what he was building, he said. They'll be dealt with. The rest, the majority of the men in the organization, either didn't know or were kept too compartmentalized to know. I'll speak with each of them. A pause. It will take time. Will they question your leadership after this? Some of them will. He said it without defensiveness. A leader whose second-in-command builds a 12-year conspiracy inside his organization invites questions. I'll have to answer them. Will you be able to? Yes. No hesitation, not arrogance, certainty, which was a different thing. Because I already know what I did wrong, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. Men in my position tend to lose the room when they manage the story instead of owning the mistake. I'm not going to manage this story. She thought about that. That will cost you. It'll cost me less than the alternative. She believed him. She had spent 7 days developing an extremely precise picture of this man, and the picture included a capacity for accountability that she had not expected and that continued at intervals to catch her slightly off guard. I want to speak to you about something separate, she said. All right. My father's debt. The arrangement. A pause. Yes. I'd like to understand clearly what the current status of it is. After tonight. After everything that's been... After what I did this week. She heard him move. Not to the window this time. Toward her, though he stopped at his usual distance, the maintained perimeter she had catalogued on day 1. The debt is cleared, he said. It was cleared the day you signed the marriage contract. That was the arrangement. I know what the arrangement was, she said. I'm asking about what it is now. A silence, longer than his silences usually were. "What are you asking me, Alara?" "I'm asking whether I'm still here because of a contract," she said, "or whether there's a conversation we need to have about something else." She heard him, the specific sound of a man who has been controlling his breathing very carefully and has just stopped controlling it quite as carefully. "There's a conversation we need to have, Zep," he said. "Then have it," she said. "I don't have much patience for things that take longer than they need to." "I know you don't." And she heard something in his voice that she had been hearing at intervals since the third day and had been carefully not naming. "I want you to stay. Not because of the contract. Not because of your father, because—" He stopped. Then, with the particular difficulty of a man who had not said this particular category of thing to another person in a very long time, "Because this house is different with you in it. I'm different. And I don't want to go back to what it was before." The room was very quiet. "I want to stay," she said. "I want to be clear that I am saying that as a person who is choosing it, not as someone who has run out of other options. I have other options. I am choosing this." "I know," he said. "That's the only reason I'm saying it." She sat with that for a moment. "This is going to be complicated," she said. "What I can and can't do. What you're accustomed to. This house and how it works." "I know. You'll have to stop trying to manage what I'm exposed to. I can hear things you would rather I didn't hear. That's not going to change." "I know that too. And I will need—" She paused. This part was harder. Not the words themselves, but the act of saying them, which required admitting that she needed something, which was the specific vulnerability she had been most systematically avoiding for 5 years. "I will need you to tell me things I can't hear. What a room looks like when I walk into it, who is watching, small things, things that don't seem important." He was quiet for a moment. "I can do that." "It doesn't come naturally to you." "No, but I'll learn." She almost smiled. She let herself this time. "You're very confident about things you haven't done yet." "I'm confident about things I've decided to do," he said. "There's a difference." She thought about that. "Yes?" she said. "There is." The conversation wound down in the way conversations did when they had covered the necessary ground and were approaching something that words were less useful for. She heard him cross the room, not to the window, not to the desk, to the chair across from her, the one she had heard him avoid for the entire week because he conducted all his business standing or at the desk, never seated across from someone in a conversational position. He sat down in it. She heard the specific small sounds of a man settling into a chair in which he was slightly uncomfortable because it was unfamiliar territory. She did not say anything about it. They sat in the room for a while in the quiet that was not the quiet of two people assessing each other anymore. 3 days later, Ronaldo Voss came to the house. Alara heard his car in the driveway, the particular engine sound of her father's old vehicle, which she had been hearing her entire life and would know anywhere. And she heard him get out and stand by the car for a long moment before he walked toward the front door. He was shown to the front sitting room. She went to him. He was seated when she came in, which meant he hadn't trusted himself to stay standing. She heard it in the way the chair shifted when she entered. A man who had been sitting with something heavy and was bracing himself to say it. "Alara," he said. "Dad." He stopped. She heard him press his hands flat on his knees. She knew that gesture. He'd done it her entire childhood when he was preparing to say something he'd been putting off. "I know that what I did, how I handled the debt, putting you in this position—" "Stop," she said. He stopped. "I know what you did and why you did it," she said. "And I know that you told yourself you had no choice. And I know that you probably believe that. And I know—" She paused. "I know that you have spent my entire life making decisions that were easier for you than they were for me, and then needing me to tell you it was all right." He said nothing. "I'm not going to do that this time," she said. "I'm not angry. I'm past angry. But I'm not going to tell you it was all right, because it wasn't, and we're both old enough to stop pretending otherwise." Her father's breathing had gone unsteady. She heard it, the particular fragility of an old man's breath when the thing he had been carrying finally found its full weight. "I know," he said. His voice was rough. "I know it wasn't." Good, she said. A silence. Is she safe? He said. Mara. She's fine. She went home 2 days ago. And you? I'm fine. You're... He stopped. You're staying here? Yes. A long pause. Is that what you want? She had expected the question to carry the weight of his guilt, to be an appeal, a request for her to say yes so he could feel better about the chain of events he had set in motion. But when she listened carefully, she heard something else underneath it, something that was actually a question, actual concern, uncomplicated by strategy. Her father was not a bad man. He was a weak one, and there was a difference, and she had spent a lot of years confusing the two and making herself angrier than the situation warranted. It's what I want, she said. Yes. Another long silence. He's good to you? We're getting there, she said. She heard her father exhale, the specific exhale of a person releasing something they have held for longer than is healthy. Not relief, exactly. Something more complicated than relief. The beginning of a reckoning with a version of himself that he had been avoiding. I'm going to do better, he said. I know what that's worth right now, but I am. I know, she said. And she did. She heard it in his voice, the same way she heard everything in voices, the thing beneath the surface, the actual state of a person. Her father was telling the truth. Whether the truth would survive contact with his habits and his weaknesses and the next difficult moment that came along was another question, and one she couldn't answer for him. Come back when you're ready, she said, not to apologize again, just to visit. She heard him nod, the slight shift of weight, the particular movement of a person receiving something they weren't certain they'd earned. He left. She stood in the sitting room after he was gone and let the silence of it settle. Carla appeared in the doorway. Lunch is ready, Miss Voss, or Mrs. DeLuca, if you prefer. Alara, she said. Just Alara. Alara, Carla said, and there was something warm in it. Not performed warmth, the real kind, which Carla had been carrying beneath her professional surface since day one, and which Alara had registered and not commented on until now. Thank you, Carla, she said. For the first week, it was harder than I showed. A pause. I know, Carla said. I thought you managed it very well. I almost didn't, Alara said. On day 4, when I heard them outside my door. I know about that too, Carla said quietly. I heard them as well. I want you to know that I was considering going to Mr. DeLuca that night. I wasn't certain. I should have been certain. You had been in this house a long time, Alara said. Long enough to know that certainty was expensive. Yes. I don't hold it against you. A pause. Thank you. They went to lunch. Vittorio was already at the table. She heard him stand when she came in, which he had not done in the first week. She had been seated before he arrived for most meals, and on the occasions they had arrived simultaneously, he had not stood. She noted it without commenting. It was a small thing. Small things were how people showed you who they were becoming, which was different from who they had been. How is your father? He said. She sat down. Honest, for once. We'll see how long it lasts. He made a sound, not quite a laugh, but in the same neighborhood. What? She said. You talk about people the way a doctor talks about a patient. Precise. No extra sentiment. Is that a criticism? No? A pause. It's something I noticed early on. What else did you notice early on? She said. He was quiet for a moment, in the way he was quiet when he was choosing words rather than assembling them. That you were the most dangerous person in any room you walked into, he said, and that nobody knew it but you. She thought about that. You knew, she said, by the second day. The second day I suspected. By the end of the first week, I was certain. A pause. Which was also the first week I had ever had a variable in my house that I decided, actively, not to control. She picked up her fork. That must have been difficult for you. Extremely, he said. She did smile this time. She let it happen, didn't pull it back, and she heard the quality of the silence across the table change in response. The particular shift that happened when Vittorio De Luca encountered something he wasn't prepared for and was working out how he felt about it. She decided she would keep doing it, for no strategic reason, just because she felt like it. Lunch was quiet in the way that was comfortable rather than managed. Carla moved around them with the efficiency of a person who had found her rhythm. Somewhere in the upper part of the house, one of the guards changed position. She tracked the footstep pattern shift, noted it, filed the new rotation. Old habit. She would always do that. She had accepted this about herself some time ago. Afterward, they walked. Not formally. It was not a planned walk. It was what happened when two people finish a meal in a large house and neither of them goes immediately to work. They moved through the ground floor and then through the door to the garden on the south side, and she had mapped this garden in the first 3 days. She knew the path, the stone border, the place where the gravel ended and the grass began, the bench near the east wall that she had sat on twice in the evenings when she needed air and quiet, and the particular privacy of being outside in a space that felt like it didn't require anything from her. Vittorio walked beside her, not slightly ahead, not slightly behind. Beside. She had noticed him adjusting this over the past 3 days. The unconscious forward-leading tendency of a person accustomed to moving through the world with authority. The deliberate adjustment, the ending up even with her. He had been doing it without comment and without drawing attention to it, which was the right way to do it, and she had not said anything, which was also the right thing. The organization meets at the end of the week, he said. The full group. I'll address what happened. All of it. How will they respond? With varying degrees of difficulty, he said. Sandro is solid. 3 or 4 others I'm certain of. The rest will need time. And the northern corridor? We rebuild it. Smaller to start. Cleaner. A pause. Some of what Marco had set up was corrupt from the foundation. Ferretti had been inserting people into our logistics chain for longer than the last year. We're finding them. How many? 6 so far, probably more. She absorbed that. He was thorough. He was patient, Vittorio said. And there was something in his voice when he said it. Not grief exactly, something adjacent to it. The particular weight of someone processing a loss that doesn't have a clean category. She did not push it. Some things needed to be walked beside rather than addressed directly. They continued down the garden path. The sun was out. She could feel it on her face, on her left arm, where her sleeve was rolled. The torn jacket was in the trash. She had asked Carla to dispose of it that morning and had not felt particularly sentimental about it, which she took as a sign that she was all right. Elara? Vittorio said. Yes. I want to tell you something that I've been... He paused. Something I haven't said well yet, in any of our conversations. She waited. When I agreed to the arrangement with your father, I didn't think about you, he said. As a person, you were a solution to a problem. I'm not telling you this to... I know why you're telling me, she said. I want to say it anyway. Then say it. I was wrong to reduce you to a function, he said. You came into this house as a consequence of a transaction, and you shouldn't have been a consequence of anything. You should have been asked. A pause. I know I can't undo that. I know it's not... Vittorio, she said. Yes. You are a man who makes precise calculations. I am a woman who structures the world through patterns and analysis. Between the two of us, we have approximately 1/4 of the emotional vocabulary of a normal person. A pause. Is that a problem? He said. I don't know yet, she said honestly. I think we're going to have to invent some of it as we go. She heard him exhale. Slow. And at the end of it something that might, from a different man in a different register, have been a laugh. From Vittorio it was simply an exhale that had warmth in it. I can do that, he said. Yes, she said. I think you can. They reached the bench near the east wall. She sat. He sat beside her. The sun was warm and the garden was full of the sounds of early afternoon. Birds, a distant vehicle on the road beyond the property wall. The wind across whatever was planted in the beds to her right. She thought about the morning she had sat at the small kitchen table in her father's apartment, with her hands flat on the surface and her white cane against the chair, listening to a car idle for 11 minutes outside. She thought about the way she had felt that morning. Not frightened, exactly. Something more specific than frightened. The feeling of walking into a dark room and not yet knowing its dimensions. She knew the dimensions now. Not all of them. The house was still giving her new details every day. A sound in the east wall she hadn't catalogued. A change in Carla's morning routine that suggested something she hadn't yet determined. The way the garden changed acoustically as the season moved. There would always be more to learn. That was not a problem. That was what made a space worth inhabiting. She thought about Marco Belandi. He was not in this house anymore, and would not be. And the organization was in the slow process of excising the presence he had left behind the way a body expelled something foreign. She did not feel uncomplicated about him. He had been dangerous and had threatened her family, and had been willing to use her as a disposable piece in a plan he had been patient enough to build across 12 years. She did not forgive him for any of that, but she had heard his voice that last night in the farmhouse, the stripped final version of it, the voice of a man who had spent 12 years becoming something and was watching it all leave him at once. And she was not without understanding of what that was. Understanding was not the same as forgiveness. She knew the difference. She thought about Petra, still in the house, still refolding towels that didn't need refolding. She would speak with her again, now that the dust had settled. Not about Marco. That was over. About whether she was all right. Carla had mentioned, neutrally, that Petra had not been eating well. Small things. The things that told you more about a person's state than anything they said. She would pay attention to it. She was good at paying attention. "Tell me something," she said. "What?" Vittorio said. "Tell me what the garden looks like. Right now. What I'm sitting in the middle of." A silence. She heard him look. The particular quality of a person turning their attention from inward to outward. "The beds on the left are overgrown," he said. "They were Marco's project. Nobody's touched them since." A pause. "The beds on the right are... someone's been tending them. Carla, I think. Roses. They're not open yet. Mostly buds." Another pause. "The wall ahead of us has a crack in it near the top. Left side. I've been meaning to have it repaired for 2 years." "Why haven't you?" "I forget about it until I'm looking at it. And then? And then I go do something else and forget again." "Have it repaired," she said, "before the winter. If water gets into that crack and freezes..." "I know," he said. "I know." "You won't forget this time?" A pause. "Probably not. I have better accountability now." She sat with that. The sun moved a degree or two. The wind shifted. She thought about the city beyond the property wall. The city that had been whispering for 7 days about the blind woman who had married the most dangerous man in it. She thought about what the whispers would say now, if they knew what had actually happened inside these walls in the past week, whether they would be able to square it with the story they had already decided to tell about her, whether the story would change or whether people would reshape the facts until they fit the version they had already built. She decided she did not particularly care. She had spent 5 years managing the story other people told about her. The tragedy, the poor Voss girl, the one who would need help her whole life. She had managed it carefully and skillfully, and she was tired of it. Let the city whisper what it wanted. She knew what had happened, and so did Vittorio, and so did the handful of people inside this house who had been present for any of it. That was enough. That was actually more than enough. "Come on," Vittorio said. He stood from the bench. She heard him extend his arm toward her. She knew it not by sight, but by the shift in the air between them, the way his presence changed direction, the specific positioning of the gesture. She took his arm, not because she needed it. She knew the path back to the house. She had known it for 5 days. She could have walked it in the dark at speed. She took it because he had offered it, and she had decided, in this particular season of her life, to stop refusing things that were offered to her for the right reasons. They walked back across the garden. The gravel sounded different with 2 people on it. A fuller sound, less precise, 2 rhythms overlapping and finding, after a few steps, a shared pace. At the door she stopped. "Vittorio," she said. "Yes." "The crack in the wall," she said. "Left side, near the top." "I'll call someone tomorrow." "Today," she said. A beat. Then very quietly, something that was not quite a laugh, and was better than one. "Today." he said. She went inside. The house received her the way it had received her every day since the first one, with its particular arrangement of sounds and temperatures and the small daily evidence of 20 people living and working inside its walls. The whole intricate acoustic map of it that she had built piece by piece in the first days and had been refining every hour since. She walked through it without her cane touching the floor. She didn't need it here. She had not needed it here for 5 days. She went to the second-floor study and sat in the chair by the window and put her hands flat on the desk in front of her, the way she had sat at her father's kitchen table a week ago, and she let the house settle around her. This was her house now. Not because she had been given it, and not because she had survived it, but because she had learned it. All of it. Its rhythms and its silences and its damaged places and the people moving through it who were, all of them, in various states of figuring out what came next. She was good at damaged places. She had been navigating them her whole life. She was, she thought, in exactly the right one. Outside in the garden, she heard, faint but clear, the way everything was faint but clear to her, the sound of Vittorio on the phone. And she caught the word contractor and the word today, and she sat back in her chair and was quiet and let herself be for a moment, without calculation or strategy or the carefully maintained stillness of a woman who had learned to move through danger without ever letting the danger see her move. She was still. Not the performed stillness of someone who had learned to pass through the world without taking up space. The real kind. The kind that didn't need to explain itself. The house held her. She let it.